The message arrived in every language, which should have been humanity's first warning that something had gone terribly wrong. Not translated, composed. Each version perfect, each word chosen with the precision of a surgeon selecting exactly where to cut. Mandarin that flowed like silk. English that struck like hammers. Swahili that sang. Arabic that commanded. Every human tongue rendered with such mathematical exactness that linguists would later describe it as, quote, correct in a way that makes your skin crawl. The Galactic Linguistic Council had learned to speak human. They'd just forgotten to learn how to sound human. Attention, human civilization of Earth and associated territories. The Galactic Linguistic Council, coalition of 300 sovereign civilizations, custodians of communication protocols, arbiters of semantic stability, hereby issues Decree 7-441, the Great Silence. Analysis of human linguistic systems has determined structural instability across all documented languages. Semantic frameworks demonstrate critical violations of established communication safety protocols. Continued use poses measurable risk to galactic cognitive infrastructure. Classification: Linguistic Hazard Class 4 Cognitively Contagious. Human languages are hereby quarantined pending restructure or elimination. In the UN General Assembly, where the message played on every screen simultaneously, the chamber fell into the kind of silence that comes from people forgetting how to breathe. Ambassador Chen of the East Asian Federation found her voice first. They're banning our languages? No. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, chief linguist for the African Union, stared at her datapad where the decree scrolled in perfect Yoruba, then switched to Zulu, then Amharic, each version technically flawless and emotionally empty. They're calling them a disease. The message continued, relentless. Human communication demonstrates 847 documented violations of universal linguistic stability standards. Violation Category 1, Semantic Ambiguity. Words possess multiple contradictory definitions, contingent upon contextual variables. Violation Category 2, Metaphorical Contamination. Literal meanings are deliberately supplanted by figurative associations. Violation Category 3, IDIOMATC, Instability. Phrases convey meanings unrelated to component words. Violation Category 4, Emotional Substrate. Communication channels carry effective content that interferes with semantic purity. Violation Category 5, Irony protocols. Speakers intentionally convey opposite of literal meaning. Additional 842 violations catalogued and filed. Irony protocols? The Russian delegate's translator struggled with the phrase, producing something that sounded like, quote, opposite meaning communication rules. He laughed, bitter and sharp. They've classified sarcasm as a violation of galactic law. It gets worse. Ambassador Martinez from the Latin American Alliance scrolled through supporting documents. They've analyzed everything. Every broadcast, every transmission, every human conversation we've ever had in open space. They've been studying us for years. The data was damning in its comprehensiveness. Analysis of Shakespearean sonnets flagged for metaphorical instability. Ancient Chinese poetry marked as semantically non-viable. Arabic calligraphy classified as visual noise interfering with linguistic clarity. Every human language, living or dead, reduced to a list of violations against rules humanity had never agreed to follow. The Council has established that human linguistic systems function as vectors for cognitive contamination. Exposure to human communication patterns has demonstrated measurable effects on non-human cognition. Increase in ambiguity tolerance 23%. Decrease in literal interpretation accuracy 31%. Emergence of metaphorical thinking in previously logical species 17 documented cases. Spontaneous development of humor appreciation 8 cases. These effects are deemed unacceptable alterations to baseline cognitive function. They're afraid, Dr. Okonkwo said quietly, that we're making them think like us. The European Council's representative stood, voice shaking with the kind of rage that comes from being told your culture is a contagion. This is linguistic genocide. It's worse than that. Chen pulled up a sidebar document, Council Communication Protocols spanning 3,000 pages. They're offering to help us, approved languages, translators, complete restructure of human communication according to their standards. She looked up, eyes hollow. They want to teach us how to speak without poetry. Compliance timeline, 72 standard Earth hours. All human linguistic transmission must cease. All verbal communication will be conducted via approved council languages, pending human linguistic restructure. Translation devices will be provided. Non-compliance will result in communication quarantine. Earth and associated human territories will be isolated from all galactic networks. This is not negotiable. This is safety protocol. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in 20 different languages, which itself felt like an act of defiance. The translator, AI, struggled, producing a cacophony of overlapping voices, none quite capturing the fury, the fear, the sheer grief of people watching their cultures get classified as hazardous material. We can't comply. The Australian delegate's voice cut through the chaos. Adopting their languages means losing everything, our literature, our humor, our history. How do you translate Dreamtime into a language without metaphor? How do you explain Saudade without emotional substrate? How do you say Ubuntu to a species that thinks ambiguity is a virus? Dr. Okonkwo's hands trembled. I am because we are. That doesn't translate into their logical frameworks. The meaning exists in the space between the words. But if we don't comply... Martinez pulled up the quarantine protocols. They'll cut us off. No trade, no travel, no communication with any galactic civilization. We'll be talking to ourselves in the dark. The vote was called. Compliance or isolation. Safety or silence. The tally began climbing. Nation after nation, choosing survival over culture, connection over authenticity. The mathematics were brutal. Humanity had just joined the galactic community. 70 years of first contact, trade agreements, cultural exchange, all of it built on the promise of communication. And now the price of that communication was revealed. Speak like them or speak to no one. Ambassador Chen watched the numbers and felt something die inside her. They were going to vote yes. They were going to volunteer for linguistic extinction because the alternative was being alone. 50 nations. 70. 90. Ambassador Chen? Her aide's voice was tight. There's an incoming transmission. Fringe Station 2. Priority override. Not now. Ma'am, it's marked urgent, and it's in English. The screen flared. Audio only, but the voice that filled the chamber was unmistakable, warm, confident, carrying the kind of accent that suggested someone who'd learned to speak in 3 different hemispheres and liked all of them. Hey, Galactic Linguistic Council, this is Zara Zenith, Compass Rose, currently broadcasting from Fringe Station 2, where we've got the best coffee in 3 parsecs and the worst opinions on everything. A few delegates laughed despite themselves. The voice had that effect, like sunshine breaking through clouds made of bureaucracy. I heard about your little decree, fascinating stuff. Really, 847 violations? That's almost impressive. We've been talking wrong for our entire evolutionary history and didn't even know it. The sarcasm was thick enough to spread on toast. Several council translators flagged it as semantic inversion, meaning unclear. Here's the thing, though. About your deadline, your protocols, your whole humanity needs to shut up for galactic safety situation. Zara's voice shifted, still friendly, but with an edge sharp enough to cut. We've got one word for you, just one. I think it'll clear everything right up. Ambassador Chen found herself leaning forward. Around the chamber, delegates held their breath. Stand by, Council. We're going to have a conversation about this. In English, with metaphors, and irony, and all 847 violations you're so worried about. The transmission cut. In the silence that followed, someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole chamber erupted, not in votes, but in something that sounded dangerously like hope. The Australian delegate grinned. I don't know who that was, but I want to buy her a drink. Zara Zenith. Dr. Okonkwo was already pulling up files, and her expression shifted from grief to something wilder. Xenolinguist, archaeologist, has a reputation for finding things the Council claims don't exist and speaking languages they claim are impossible. She looked up. She once decoded a dead civilization's entire linguistic system from 3 words carved on a rock. What's she going to do? Martinez asked. Dr. Okonkwo smiled, fierce and beautiful. I think she's going to prove that human language isn't a virus. How? By weaponizing it. On screens across Earth and the fringe, the vote counter paused. Nations that had been ready to vote for compliance suddenly found themselves waiting. Because somewhere out in the black, a woman with red hair and a green suit, and absolutely no respect for authority, was about to teach the galaxy's linguistic experts that humanity's violations weren't bugs. They were features. And features could bite. The compass rose was painted green, not the sleek professional green of military vessels or the corporate green of merchant haulers, but the vivid, unapologetic green of spring grass and adventure novels, and someone who decided that if you were going to cross the galaxy, you might as well look good doing it. It sat docked at Fringe Station 2 like an emerald dropped in a junkyard, all Art Deco curves and chrome accents, engines humming with the kind of contentment that suggested they'd just done something. Physics said they couldn't, and were quite pleased with themselves. Inside the ship's main cabin, which doubled as library, laboratory, and occasionally bar, Zara Zenith sat cross-legged on an antique Persian rug she'd bartered for on Kepler 442b, surrounded by holographic projections of text in 47 languages, most of which humanity hadn't spoken in 1,000 years. Her red hair was pinned in perfect victory rolls, not a strand out of place, despite the fact that she'd spent the morning crawling through ventilation ducts to fix a coolant leak. Her explorer suit, tailored green with gold piping, practical pockets everywhere, somehow both professional and audacious, bore exactly one grease smudge on the left sleeve, which she'd noticed and decided added character. She was drinking coffee from a mug that said well-behaved linguists rarely make history in Sanskrit, and muttering to herself in what might have been Proto-Indo-European or might have been creative profanity. With Zara, it was often both. No, she said to a projection of Linear A tablets. You're hiding something. Languages don't just stop having words for water. That's suspicious. Her ship's AI designated Rosie because Zara had decided every compass needed a personality, chimed softly. Incoming transmission. Priority diplomatic. Earth Linguistic Emergency Committee. Tell them I'm busy discovering whether the Minoans had a word for bureaucratic nonsense. They say it's regarding the Council's silence decree. Zara's head snapped up. Put them through. The hologram shifted, tablets replaced by the tired face of Dr. Zara Okonkwo, who looked like she'd been awake for 3 days and had aged a decade in the process. Dr. Zenith. Just Zara. Titles make me break out in responsibility. Zara. Dr. Okonkwo managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I assume you've seen the Council's decree. Seen it, read it in 17 languages, laughed at it in 5 more. Zara stood, stretching like a cat waking from a particularly satisfying nap. They classified irony as a safety violation. That's not policy, that's comedy. It's serious, Zara. We're voting on compliance in, she checked a timer, 68 hours. Most nations are leaning toward acceptance. If we refuse, we lose everything. Everything, except the ability to say what we mean how we mean it. Zara walked to her viewport, where stars scattered like spilled diamonds. They want us to adopt their approved languages, restructure human communication, make us safe. She turned back. Safe means boring. It means connected. The alternative is isolation. The alternative, Zara said slowly, is proving they're wrong. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. Can we? The Council has 3,000 years of linguistic research. They've catalogued 10,000 galactic languages. They have rules, frameworks, entire mathematical models for semantic stability. We're chaos. Zara grinned. Beautiful, unpredictable, utterly human chaos. Which is exactly why we're going to win. You sound confident for someone facing the collective linguistic authority of 300 civilizations. I'm confident because I've read their rules. Zara pulled up the Council's 3,000-page protocol document, scrolled through it at speed that suggested she'd memorized it. They think language is architecture, logic, rules. One word equals one meaning, context is noise, ambiguity is error. She tapped the projection. They're not wrong, they're just incomplete. So you can fight this? Fight it? Zara's smile went sharp as broken glass. I'm going to break it. The Council thinks human language is dangerous? They haven't heard dangerous yet. Dr. Okonkwo hesitated. What do you need? Time, access to the Council's translation network, and coffee, lots of coffee. Zara started pacing, energy radiating off her like heat. Tell the UN to stall, make speeches, debate, do that thing humans do where we talk for hours without actually deciding anything. I need 72 hours to find the crack in their perfect system. And if you can't, then we comply, adopt their languages, and spend the rest of human history speaking like instruction manuals. But Zara turned, eyes bright with the kind of mischief that made admirals nervous and archaeologists excited. I don't lose. Ask anyone who's tried to tell me something doesn't exist. Spoiler, it always exists. I just have to find it. After Dr. Okonkwo disconnected, looking fractionally more hopeful and significantly more worried, Rosie spoke up. For reference, Council file on Zara Zenith, Captain of the Compass Rose. Would you like to review? They have a file on me. Zara's delight was audible. Extensive. Designation. Priority concern. Summary reads. Rosie's voice took on the flat, bureaucratic tone of Council documentation. Subject demonstrates consistent pattern of linguistic rule-breaking. Deploys metaphor without logical anchors, uses idioms that resist literal translation, employs humor that defies semantic analysis, has decoded 17 classified dead languages, speaks 40 human languages, estimated 60 alien languages, claims competency in several that, quote, exist only in specific emotional states, unquote. I do speak grief cant. You just have to be really sad while doing it. Threat assessment, moderate. Recommendation, monitor but do not engage. Subject's linguistic chaos appears limited to academic contexts and has not yet demonstrated weaponization potential. Zara laughed, loud and genuine. Hasn't demonstrated weaponization potential? Oh, Council, you beautiful, logical, completely unprepared bureaucrats. She pulled up her research interface, fingers flying across holographic keyboards. Let's educate you about what human language can do when someone tries to make it dangerous. What are you looking for? A word. Zara's smile was the smile of someone who'd just spotted treasure on a map everyone else said was empty. One perfect, impossible, utterly human word that will make their entire translation system have an existential crisis. Parameters? It has to be common, simple, something humans use every day without thinking about it. But she pulled up the Council's violation categories, studying them like a general studying enemy fortifications. It has to violate their rules so completely, so fundamentally, that their AI can't process it without spiraling. That's extremely specific. That's human language. We're extremely specific about being completely ambiguous. Zara started pulling linguistic databases: English, Mandarin, Swahili, Arabic, Hindi, Ancient Greek, dead languages, living slang, everything humanity had ever used to communicate thought and feeling, and the 1,000 shades of meaning between them. She worked through the night. Coffee turned cold and was replaced. Holographic projections layered like archaeological strata, words upon words upon words, each one a tiny rebellion against the idea that meaning could be controlled. Around hour 4, she found candidates. Set, 437 definitions in English alone. Run, 396 definitions. Get, 289 definitions. But none of them were perfect. The Council's A: I could handle multiple definitions if each definition was distinct. What she needed was a word where the definitions contradicted each other, depending on context. Around hour 7, she started examining words whose meanings changed based on tone, inflection, what came before or after. And then she found it. One word. 4 letters. Used constantly. Impossible to translate without context. A word that could mean opposite things, depending on how you said it, when you said it, who you said it to, what expression you wore while saying it. A word that violated every single one of the Council's precious rules simultaneously. Zara leaned back, staring at the word floating in holographic light, and her grin could have powered the Compass Rose's engines. Rosie, get me a direct channel to the Galactic Linguistic Council. Priority transmission. They're not accepting communications from human sources. They'll accept this one, trust me. What are you going to tell them? Zara stood, smoothed her suit, fixed her hair, and positioned herself in front of the transmission array with the posture of someone about to start a war with a dictionary. Good morning, Galactic Linguistic Council. This is Zara Zenith, Compass Rose, currently residing in Fringe Station 2, where I've spent the last several hours reading your absolutely fascinating decree about human linguistic violations. Her voice was warm, friendly, the tone of someone complimenting your outfit before pointing out it's on fire. I have to say, 847 violations is impressive, really. We've been doing communication wrong for our entire evolutionary history. How embarrassing for us. She leaned forward slightly. But here's the thing. You said human language is dangerous, unstable, cognitively hazardous. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Her smile went sharp. Let me show you how right you are. One word, that's all I need. One perfect, common, everyday human word that's going to make your translation systems question everything they think they know about meaning. She paused for effect. Stand by, Council. Class is in session. She ended the transmission, still smiling. Every system has a weak point, she said to the stars beyond her viewport, even one built on pure logic. Rosie, how long until they receive it? Transmission reaches Council systems in 47 seconds. And how long until their AI starts trying to translate it? Immediately upon receipt. Council protocol requires automatic analysis of all human communication for safety assessment. Zara pulled up monitoring protocols, piggybacking on the Council's own communication networks. Technically illegal, ethically questionable, absolutely necessary. Then let's watch their perfect system try to handle one perfectly common word. The transmission reached the Council's systems. Analysis began. And somewhere in the crystalline depths of the galaxy's most sophisticated linguistic AI, processing clusters began to heat up as they attempted to answer one simple question. What did she mean by right? The answer was yes. All of it. None of it. Depends on what you mean by mean. Zara watched the processing spikes and poured herself another cup of coffee. Welcome to Human Language Council. Population, ambiguous. 47 hours until Earth's vote. 47 hours to teach 300 civilizations that chaos wasn't a flaw. It was a feature. And features, when wielded by someone who knew what they were doing, could bring empires to their knees. Or at least make them question every assumption they'd built their civilization on. Which, Zara reflected, was close enough. The Council homeworld was a monument to the belief that perfection could be achieved through rules. Crystalline spires rose in mathematically precise intervals across the capital city, every building positioned according to optimal acoustic principles. Every street width calculated for maximum communication efficiency. Even the light, filtered through atmospheric processors, was tuned to frequencies that enhanced clarity of thought. It was beautiful in the way an equation was beautiful, elegant, flawless, and utterly without surprise. The compass rose landed like a splash of paint on a sterile canvas, green hull gleaming against white architecture, engines humming with the kind of contentment that came from traveling improbably fast through probably inadvisable routes. Zara descended the ramp wearing her green explorer suit, red hair perfect in its victory rolls, coffee mug in hand because some rituals were universal, and a smile that made the Council's security detail instinctively check if their translation protocols were working properly. They were. That was the problem. Beautiful city, she said to no one in particular, voice carrying across the landing pad with the confidence of someone who knew everyone was listening. Very tidy. Does anyone ever have fun here, or is that classified as semantic instability? The welcoming committee, 3 council officials in formal robes that somehow managed to be both elaborate and boring, approached with the careful precision of people greeting something that might explode if handled incorrectly. Zara Zenith. The lead official's translator rendered their multitonal speech into flat English. You are hereby placed under diplomatic protocols. All communication will be... In English, Zara interrupted cheerfully. That was the deal. No translators, just us, and the language you're terrified of. We are not terrified. Sure, you just threatened military action against grammar. Totally normal response to not being scared. She took a sip of coffee. So, council chamber, I assume you've got the full 300 species waiting? Good. I've prepared visual aids. The council chamber was a cathedral of communication, circular, 300 meters across, with each species, delegation arranged in perfect acoustic balance. Every word spoken here was meant to reach every listener with equal clarity, translated in real time by Logos through individual neural interfaces. Except Logos was currently running at 91% processing allocation, trying to determine if 17,000 humans were being sincere or sarcastic, which meant translations were delayed by up to 3 seconds, creating conversational lag that made diplomats twitchy. Zara walked to the center of the chamber like she owned it, boot heels clicking on crystal floors in rhythms that followed no pattern Logos could identify. 300 species watched. Most had never seen a human in person. They'd read reports, studied linguistic analyses, reviewed the classification, structurally unstable, cognitively hazardous, class 4, threat. What they saw was a woman in a green suit, holding coffee and looking absolutely delighted to be there. High linguist Corthalix materialized in the center observation sphere, a crystalline being of pure thought, elegant as mathematics, currently experiencing what it was beginning to suspect might be anger. When it spoke, every translator in the chamber rendered its voice simultaneously, creating a chorus of precise, emotionless clarity. Zara Zenith, you have damaged galactic communication infrastructure. You have destabilized diplomatic protocols. You have weaponized your native language against systems designed for peaceful cooperation. What defense do you offer? Zara set down her coffee mug on a podium that definitely wasn't designed for beverages. Defense? I said one word. 4 letters. Common English term that millions of humans use daily without causing galactic incidents. She looked up at the crystalline sphere. You built your entire civilization on the assumption that language can be controlled, mapped, made safe, and predictable. I just proved it can't. Language must be regulated. Ambiguity causes misunderstanding. Misunderstanding causes conflict. Our protocols have maintained galactic peace for 3 millennia. Have they? Zara pulled up holographic displays. Thousands of documented disputes, wars, trade conflicts across Council history. Or have they just hidden misunderstanding under a veneer of precise translation? Made everyone think they understood each other perfectly while actual meaning got lost in your metadata. A murmur rippled through the chamber. 300 species, versions of uncomfortable silence. Our system provides clarity. Your system provides the illusion of clarity. Zara walked around the podium, addressing the chamber like a professor who'd just caught her students cheating. You translate words perfectly, but words aren't meaning. They're gestures toward meaning. And gestures require context, relationship, history, everything your system strips away as noise. Context is preserved as metadata. Context isn't data, Zara interrupted. It's lived experience. It's knowing that when your partner says, I'm fine, they might mean, I'm genuinely okay. Or, I'm upset and you should know why. It's understanding that, that's interesting, can mean 4 completely different things depending on who says it and how they say it. Provide example. Gladly. Zara's smile was the smile of someone who'd been waiting for this exact question. Logos. You there? A crystalline tone confirmed the AI's attention. Great. Translate this phrase. That's interesting. Logos analysis. That's interesting. Equals statement, indicating subject matter evokes curiosity or attention. Definition. The mentioned topic possesses qualities that stimulate intellectual engagement. Perfect. Zara turned to the chamber. Now watch how humans actually use that phrase. She pulled up video recordings, actual human conversations, spliced together. Scene 1. A scientist examining data. Genuinely excited. That's interesting. Meaning, that's genuinely fascinating, and I want to know more. Scene 2. Someone at a party listening to a boring story. That's interesting. Meaning, I'm pretending to care, but I'm actually dying inside. Scene 3. A parent looking at a child's bizarre art project. That's interesting. Meaning, that's weird and I'm not sure what I'm looking at, but I love you. Scene 4. Someone in an argument, voice dripping sarcasm. Oh, that's interesting. Meaning, that's absolutely not interesting, and you're wrong. Scene 5. A doctor reviewing concerning test results, pausing. That's interesting. Meaning, I'm buying time to think about how to deliver bad news. The chamber fell silent. Same words, Zara said quietly. 5 completely different meanings, not based on the words themselves, but on tone, context, relationship, what came before, what the listener knows about the speaker. This is imprecise. This is human, and it's not imprecise. It's efficient. We pack layers of meaning into simple phrases because we trust each other to understand the context. We communicate not just with words, but with everything around the words. Your system is unstable. Your system is incomplete. Zara walked closer to Corthalix's sphere. You've spent 3,000 years building rules for perfect communication, but perfect communication is impossible. Meaning isn't transmitted. It's negotiated. Every conversation is two minds trying to sync up, and they never sync perfectly. Ever. Then, how do you function? If perfect understanding is impossible, we don't need perfect understanding. We need good enough understanding. We need context, flexibility, the ability to say, "Wait, what did you mean by that?" and adjust. She smiled. Your system doesn't prevent misunderstanding. It just makes everyone pretend they understood perfectly when they didn't. A delegate, species unknown to Zara, but clearly disturbed, spoke up. But if ambiguity is inevitable, how do we prevent wars caused by miscommunication? You can't prevent them with perfect translation. You prevent them by building relationships where people want to understand each other, where they're willing to say, "I don't understand," explain, instead of assuming the translation is perfect and getting offended. She pulled up another display, Earth's diplomatic history, messy and complicated and full of misunderstandings that got resolved through conversation, not translation. We've been communicating in ambiguous, context-dependent languages for thousands of years. We've had wars, yeah, but we've also had peace, art, poetry, philosophy, all of it built on languages that break every one of your rules. You advocate for linguistic chaos. I advocate for linguistic honesty. Zara's voice softened. Your system is beautiful, Corthalix. Elegant. The math is perfect. But it's built on a false assumption that language can be made safe by eliminating ambiguity. It can't, because meaning doesn't exist in words. It exists in minds, and minds are messy, chaotic, contextual things that resist standardization. She gestured to the Council's perfect architecture. Your languages hide ambiguity behind rules. You pretend precision equals understanding, but it doesn't. It just means everyone's confused in exactly the same way, and no one admits it. If we acknowledge this, if we accept that our framework is incomplete, what then? Then you learn. Zara smiled. That's my offer. Revoke the silence decree. Let humans speak how we speak, with all our messy ambiguity and context-dependent chaos. In exchange, I'll teach you how to work with linguistic ambiguity instead of against it. Teach us what? That ambiguity isn't a bug, it's a feature. That context isn't noise, it's meaning. That the space between words is where understanding actually happens. She spread her hands. Human languages embrace ambiguity openly. We know our words are imperfect. We know context matters. We know we might be misunderstood. So we check, we ask. We say, wait, what did you mean by that? We negotiate meaning in real time. She looked up at Corthalix. Or, her smile went sharp again, you can keep fighting. Keep trying to ban languages that won't be banned. And watch every human in the galaxy, all 14 billion of us, weaponize puns, sarcasm, idioms, and context-dependent communication until your entire translation network collapses under the weight of trying to process linguistic chaos. The chamber was silent. 300 species, none quite sure what to say. Finally, Corthalix spoke. We require time to deliberate. Take all the time you need, Zara said. I'll be at the landing pad, drinking coffee, using language dangerously. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council began the long, difficult process of admitting that maybe, just maybe, perfect communication had always been impossible. The announcement came 43 hours after Zara's lesson, transmitted simultaneously across every frequency the galaxy could receive, in every language the Council had ever catalogued, including, for the first time, several human languages rendered with actual understanding rather than mathematical precision. Galactic Linguistic Council, coalition of 300 sovereign civilizations, hereby issues Decree 7-442, revocation of the Great Silence. On Earth, in the UN General Assembly where representatives had been watching countdown timers with the expression of people awaiting either execution or reprieve, the words hit like dawn after endless night. Previous classification of human linguistic systems as structurally unstable and cognitively hazardous is hereby withdrawn. Ambassador Chen's hand went to her mouth. The Council acknowledges that our linguistic framework, while elegant and functional, was incomplete. Dr. Okonkwo laughed, sudden and genuine and full of relief she hadn't realized she was holding. Ambiguity is no longer classified as error. It is acknowledged as contextual meaning variation, a feature of communication systems that operate within complex social and emotional frameworks. The word feature was emphasized. Deliberately. Someone on the council had been paying attention to Zara's lessons. Humanity may use any language. All linguistic sanctions are lifted. The Great Silence Decree is revoked. The chamber erupted, not in cheers, but in dozens of languages spoken simultaneously, a cacophony of relief and joy and the sheer visceral pleasure of people realizing they could speak however they wanted. It was beautiful chaos. The Council, for the first time in its history, made no attempt to translate it into perfect clarity. The galaxy's reaction was complicated. In the Nexus Collective's administrative centers, military leaders looked at the decree like it was a surrender document. The Council admitted they were wrong. Not wrong, a linguistic advisor corrected nervously. Incomplete. There's a difference. Is there? I think so. The distinction seems ambiguous. That's not helping. But in other corners of the galaxy, the decree landed differently. On Velkar Prime, a poet who'd been writing an approved council standard for 70 years, pulled out old notebooks written in their native tongue, full of metaphor and emotion and meanings that didn't map cleanly to logic, and wept. On the Cathern homeworld, diplomats who'd spent decades translating their thought speech into rigid council protocols started experimenting with more fluid expressions. Their messages became harder to translate. They became more true. In the Krenak Empire, a trade negotiator included a joke in an official document. Just a small one. A pun, actually. The receiving party's translator flagged it as ambiguous meaning, possible humor detected. The receiving party laughed. And somewhere in the council's files, someone noted, first recorded instance of humor in treaty negotiations. Outcome, positive. Both parties report increased trust and successful agreement. Small rebellions. Tiny experiments with linguistic flexibility. The galaxy was learning to speak like humans. Messily. Ambiguously. Honestly. Earth didn't care which category anyone fell into. They were too busy speaking, creating, playing with words in ways that would have given the old council panic attacks. The galaxy learned to live with it, then learned to love it. Then couldn't imagine how they'd communicated before. 6 months after the decree, Zara landed on an uncharted planet in a system the Compass Rose's sensors had flagged as geologically interesting, possibly artificial structures detected. The ruins were ancient, older than most spacefaring civilizations, built by a species long gone, half buried under sediment and time. Zara spent 3 days excavating, cataloging, photographing. The architecture was beautiful, all curves and flowing lines that suggested a species that thought about space differently than anyone currently alive. On the 4th day, she found the writing, carved into stone in the central chamber, preserved by luck or intention, symbols that flowed like water, meaning that resisted translation. She pulled out her portable scanner, ran the symbols through Lagos's rebuilt translation AI. Translation failed. Insufficient context. Symbols demonstrate layered meaning resistant to linear interpretation. recommendation, manual analysis by specialist. Zara smiled. Finally, a language that still knows how to keep secrets. She sat cross-legged in the dust, pulled out her notebooks, physical paper, because some things deserved to be recorded in ink, and started the long, beautiful process of decoding meaning from stone. Hours passed. The planet's sun moved across the sky. The compass rose, sent routine check-ins that Zara ignored. Slowly, pattern by pattern, the language began to reveal itself. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. It was a logographic system where each symbol carried multiple layers: literal meaning, poetic meaning, emotional resonance, cultural context. It was everything the old council would have hated, and everything Zara loved. After 2 more days of work, she decoded one complete phrase carved above what might have been a doorway or a monument or both. We were here, we spoke, we were understood enough. Zara sat back, reading it again. Then again, feeling the weight of those words across thousands of years. Not, we were understood perfectly. Not, we achieved perfect communication. Just enough. Right, she said quietly, her hand resting on stone carved by beings who'd learned the same lesson humanity was teaching the galaxy now. She said it meaning, yes. Correct. Exactly. I understand. I see you across time. Different words, same truth. All of it simultaneously. The stone had no response. It didn't need one. Zara transmitted her findings to the council: linguistic analysis, cultural context, translation notes. Corthalix responded within hours. Another species that embraced ambiguity. Another civilization that understood communication as imperfect connection rather than perfect transmission. Seems to be a universal truth, Zara replied. Across species, across time, language is messy because minds are messy. The species that survive are the ones that accept that. The Council's old framework would have classified this species as linguistically unstable. The Council's old framework would have missed the beauty. She looked at the carved phrase one more time. Perfect communication is impossible, but perfect isn't the goal. Connection is the goal. Understanding enough to build something together, that's what matters. We are grateful for the lesson. I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know, I just pointed it out. That is what teaching is. Corthalix, you beautiful crystalline disaster. You're using metaphor without realizing it. Pointed it out. That's figurative language. I'm so proud. I did not intend. Even better, you're internalizing it, using it naturally. That's how language evolves. A pause. Then, something Zara had never heard from the high linguist before. To understand why humans find language enjoyable, there is creativity in ambiguity, playfulness in possibility. Now you're getting it. Zara smiled. Language isn't a code to crack, it's a game to play. And the only rule is, communicate well enough to be understood enough. Enough. That word appears frequently in your philosophy. Because perfection is impossible, enough is achievable. She smiled. Enough is enough. That's not settling. That's accepting reality and working with it. The Council's old framework sought perfection and failed because perfection doesn't exist in communication. Minds are unique. Experiences are unique. Perfect understanding between unique entities is mathematically impossible. Yet communication occurs. Zara agreed. Not perfectly, but well enough. And that's actually more beautiful than perfection would be. Because it means we have to try. We have to care. We have to build bridges across the gaps between minds. Corthalix's form flickered through several states. Processing, accepting, integrating. Thank you, Zara Zenith. for teaching us to speak honestly rather than perfectly. Thank you for learning. Not everyone does. Humanity settled into a role they'd never expected, the galaxy's linguistic wildcards. When systems got too rigid, humans injected chaos. When rules became dogma, humans broke them creatively. When species forgot that language was supposed to facilitate communication rather than constrain it, humans reminded them, usually through puns, occasionally through poetry, sometimes just by existing loudly. It wasn't always appreciated. The Nexus Collective filed 17 formal complaints about human linguistic contamination of military protocols. Soldiers kept using slang in tactical communications. It improved morale and coordination. The Nexus hated it. The Zintar Republic tried to ban idioms from trade negotiations. Humans kept using them anyway. Trade improved because both sides had to actually talk to confirm they understood each other. But it was necessary. The galaxy learned to live with it. Then learned to love it. Then couldn't imagine how they'd communicated before. The galaxy learned to dance. And in learning, discovered that imperfect communication between imperfect minds was more beautiful than perfect silence ever could be. Somewhere in the fringe, Zara Zenith decoded another impossible language. Somewhere on Earth, a poet wrote verses in 3 languages simultaneously. Somewhere in Council archives, Logos processed a pun and tagged it, meaning uncertain, possibly humor, recommend verification, probably worth it. The galaxy spoke. Messily. Ambiguously. Honestly. And for the first time in 3,000 years, everyone understood enough. Which was always the point.